Well, hey there, and welcome to Wedding Planning Simplified. Hey, Jacqueline, how's it going?
It's so good. I feel like spring's around the corner, that this is gonna be the last blast of cold, or that's what I'm telling myself, and no one can tell me otherwise.
Well, like if you have a line to, Father Time or whoever controls the weather, Mother Nature, I guess, not Father Time.
Well,
Um,
honestly, I feel like it's
anyway,
back in March because it's so cold, but we are in April, and I'm stoked because it's DIY month, and
hmm
I'm not always the strongest with DIY, so I will have a notepad the same way that I hope everybody does at home with everything that you have to spew because it's always gold.
Yeah, well, I think it's hilarious because there is absolutely something to be said for knowing your strengths and kind of staying in your lane. My daughter said to me on Friday afternoon, "Mommy, I need to have a homemade fabric purse."
No.
And I went, "Oh, you need it, do you?" And
I would be
apparently
like, "We're
the
going
answer
to the
was yes.
market on Sunday
Yeah,
then. That sounds great."
no, so I pulled out my sewing machine and I made her a purse. And it is, I mean, don't look too closely at it because sewing is not one of my strengths. I mean, she now has a fabric purse. And, it kind of turned out similarly to the birthday cake that I made for my stepson. So I'm a really good wedding planner. I can fake my way through flowers. Sewing and baking, not my strong suit.
Yep. I think knowing your strengths and knowing your weaknesses is something good. I know a lot of the couples we talk to are super organized and always say, I probably won't need a day of coordinator. So good luck convincing me. And usually we can see like a little sweat bead after the third sentence. And we're like, there it is.
Right, absolutely. And I think that you just kind of hit the nail on the head. Most of the couples that we deal with tend to be the kind of people who are already really organized and who value, things running smoothly in the first place. And they know well enough that they don't want to be the one that's in charge on the day of the wedding. So if that is you, if we are talking to you and you are an organized human who knows that you do not want to work or solve problems or put out fires on your wedding day, then you've come to the right place because
Welcome.
today we are going to, and I don't know how sound of a business practice this is, but we're going to teach you how to do for free what we charge people for. So,
I feel as though as soon as people realize what really a day of coordination entails, they won't technically want to put that on any of their loved ones. Not saying that you don't love us, but we don't have to sit with you at Christmas, but your family might.
very true. So, the reason that we are doing this today is because we do recognize that not everybody necessarily has the budget to hire a professional. I would always advocate for hiring professionals in any category if you can. Hire a professional DJ rather than making a playlist if it works with your budget, because it's going to keep your dance floor packed and keep the energy up and be a completely different experience. Hire a professional baker so that your cake doesn't look like the birthday cake I just made. But again, we recognize that it's not within everyone's means to do that. So, our goal here today is to tell you a little bit about what we do when we provide our day of coordination, which realistically is a pretty misleading term. And I'll tell you more about that in a few minutes. But also to give you some tips and some strategies if you can't afford to hire a professional, or if you're getting pushback from someone who says, "Oh, I'll do it for you," because we all know Aunt Sharon or cousin Susan are gung ho to help out, and they are insistent sometimes that they can take on the role and you don't have to hire a professional. So we're going to give you some guidance for Aunt Susan and cousin Sharon, or however I said that in the first place, and just kind of talk through some strategies to make sure that you don't have to work on your wedding day, because it is realistically the biggest party you're ever going to throw, and you want to be able to stand back with your partner and relax and enjoy it and celebrate with the people that you truly love, instead of having to run around and set up place cards or fix the bouquets that are the wrong color.
Exactly. And there's also something to be said, and we empathize completely, that it could have always been in your budget, but because of this beautiful wedding boom, there is that lack of availability for dates. So if you are a 2023 bride, we're not here to twist your rubber arm by any means, but looking towards the future, this wedding boom may not be going away. So if you're considering a day of coordinator and this video makes you think of it, please send us a message. We're here to help as early as you need it.
Absolutely. Booking sooner rather than later is always a wise idea.
Yeah.
So, just to fill you in a little bit about what a day of coordination package looks like when we do it, first and foremost, the term day of is bullshit. Pardon my French. It's
100%.
it's garbage. It's what the industry in our region calls it. Realistically, we should call it a month of management or a wedding coordination, finalization, something like that. Because we ultimately, when we work with couples, support them for an entire year prior to their wedding. We provide monthly emails that have helpful tips and links to documents and articles and videos about the things they should be doing in their planning that month. Then we start about 6 weeks before the wedding, somewhere around that 6 to 8 week mark, with a ridiculous itinerary meeting.
Yeah.
Tends to be about 3 hours long because that's when we go over all of the details. That's when we see your eyes light up when you're excited about the flowers, or we hear your fears when you're worried about whether or not your brother's going to behave. And so we go through the whole day in ridiculous detail. Then we create a ridiculously detailed itinerary for you. It usually works out to be about a 5-page Word document, which is pretty excessive, but it is what we work from on the wedding day to make sure that nothing gets overlooked and that we know exactly what's meant to happen at which point. We also contact all of your vendors the week prior to the wedding. So we make sure that what you may have assumed, having never planned a wedding before, is actually what the vendor is going to deliver. And they may not have clarified that for you because they do this every weekend and it's second nature to them. And we see that all the time, little miscommunications that have happened throughout the planning, that you're expecting something that the vendor is not planning to deliver, and it just never came up in conversation. So we like to iron all of those details out the week before the wedding. Then if you're doing a ceremony rehearsal, regardless of whether your officiant is present or not, we are present for that. If your officiant is there, we like to kind of take a back seat. We like to make sure that everybody knows what's going on. Something that often officiants don't tend to cover is the bouquet choreography, for instance. So when are you going to hand off your bouquet? Who are you going to hand it to? Are they then going to juggle 2 bouquets, or are they going to pass off their bouquet to the second person in line? Things like that. It's also a really good opportunity for us to introduce ourselves to people and put faces to names, make sure that people know who we are and why we're bossing them around on the wedding day. And if your officiant is not there, we're happy to run you through the main points of the ceremony so that the wedding party knows where to stand, so that you know when to pass off that bouquet, so that you know how to sit when you sign the marriage license, and so that everybody's comfortable with everything. Then on the day of the wedding, we tend to provide somewhere around 12 to 14 hours of support, and that usually gets us through getting ready until last official event of the evening. So that tends to be the late night food coming out sometime around 10:30 or 11. And while we're on site, we're handling your decor details. We're touching base with all of your vendors. We're there as much, well, not as much for them as for you, but we're there to support your vendors as well, to make sure that they have what they need and they don't have any questions, or if they have a problem, we're happy to help them with that as well.
Yeah, a big one that we jump in on. Sorry to interrupt you.
No, it's all good.
A photographer out with that massive family list that you might have, because we don't want to be wasting any of your vendors' times with them having to ask questions. We want them to do the job that you've paid them to do.
Absolutely. And oftentimes it is the photographer or sometimes the DJ who's happiest to see a day of coordinator on site, because otherwise the task of making sure everything's running on time tends to fall to them. And your photographer should be focusing on taking really creative, awesome photos, not keeping an eye on the clock because we're about to miss cocktail hour. Your DJ should be worrying about playing awesome music to keep people on the dance floor instead of wondering whether or not your father's in the room when they're about to announce the father-daughter dance, for instance. So we handle all of those details so that first and foremost, you and your partner, but also so your wedding party, your family, your guests can also really relax and enjoy that day, because otherwise there are likely to be things that crop up. As organized and proactive as you are, you can never possibly anticipate every single wackadoo thing that could go wrong on your wedding day. And trust me, we've seen a lot of wackadoo things going on wedding days. And you don't want to have to pass that off to your mom when she should be helping you get into your dress for that beautiful photo. You don't want to be sending your maid of honor out to set up the place cards when she should be pouring you another mimosa. So you want to make sure that we want to make sure that you are not working, your wedding party, your family, and your friends are not working. But again, we recognize that it's not in everyone's budget. So if you are going to pass off your day of coordination duties to someone, Jacqueline, what kind of someone should you be looking for?
I always say that finding somebody that's not only responsible, but somebody that knows you inside and out is a good call. And obviously, this is tricky because that typically becomes your wedding party and your family members. So from there, it could be their partners. I can count on maybe one or two hands or five hands or all of the hands how many times I have been introduced to a maid of honor's boyfriend the day of the wedding because he's dropping off the florals because he's come to town. He doesn't have anything else to do during that morning while his girlfriend's getting ready, so he wants to help out. I never like to say to take advantage of our lovely pregnant friends that have all of the energy, but finding somebody that you know will be sober at the end of the night is always key. Amy and I are constantly concerned about your card box and ultimately anything that's tucked in those envelopes. So it's crucial that you find somebody that's sober enough to remember where everything that's important has been stored at the end of the night, as well as will be able to remember the next day where it's been stored at the end of the night. I know that I've gotten a couple calls myself where people are wondering where a cupcake stand is because I told somebody who maybe was not as sober as they had seemed. So it's just nice to know that whoever you've chosen is responsible and knows you enough to be able to say, I don't think that's how they'd want that card box to be set up. So I'm going to take the initiative to do it rather than having to check back in with you the whole day.
Absolutely. And I think that's all very excellent advice. The goal with choosing someone to do the stuff is so that you don't have to do the stuff and you don't have to explain to someone how to do the stuff. You shouldn't be standing there as you're getting your makeup done, explaining to someone how exactly you wanted that card table set up. They should already know. So that kind of brings me to my first major point that I wanted to discuss. When you're setting someone up with their tasks on the day, there's a lot of behind the scenes preparation on your part. And we have put together a really handy dandy little PDF for you that Jacqueline, I think, is going to plug into the comments here for you to download. And I mean, we could, if we were to literally talk through every element of a day of coordination, we would be here until Wednesday. So we're going to try to streamline this a little bit and give you this document so that it sparks all of those things that you're going to want to cover with the person who is coordinating your day. So feel free to grab that PDF and use that kind of as a guide as you're setting up all of the things that you're going to talk over with the person who is running your day. So the first thing that I would suggest that you do is notify all of your vendors that there is a person for them to contact if they have a question or a concern so that your phone's not ringing. So give the phone number of the person who's running the show to all of your vendors, whether or not they're going to be on site, because you never know what could pop up and you don't want your phone ringing on the day. You'll also want to have a really clear discussion about your priorities with that person, because there may be an instance where they're going to have to move some things around. They're going to have to make a decision. Perhaps we're going to have to cut out a couple of the photos that you wanted in order to keep dinner on time. But if they know that photography is an immensely huge priority for you, then they're not going to make the call to cut those photos. They're going to tell the caterer that we have to push dinner. So you need to make sure that the person who is in charge on the day has a really solid grasp of exactly how you want things to look and feel and flow so that they don't have to keep touching base with you and asking questions, because that defeats the purpose. You'll want to try and anticipate problems. Like I said before, though, you can never predict everything that could go wrong, but try to anticipate a few big ones and come up with solutions with that person so that they know how to solve a problem if it does happen without having, again, to come back and ask you. You'll obviously want to have a really solid itinerary for the day. It probably won't be 5 pages minute by minute like ours are, but you do need to consider every element of the day, starting with the very beginning of getting ready and ending with the last person leaving at the end of the night, because there are moving pieces every minute of the day. And you don't want the person who's coordinating for you to be curious about what comes next. You want them to already know. So going over that itinerary with that person is really important. I would also suggest that you pack everything really strategically. So if that person's doing any of your setup, you'll want to make sure that you have lists of which items go where. Those items are packed together. And bonus points if you put them in a tote with a picture of the setup on the top. Try to make it as seamless as possible for the person who's doing your setup, because who knows what else could go wrong. They may not be able to devote more than 5 minutes to setting up your welcome table. And if you've already given them a picture, they can just throw things where they're supposed to go and then go and solve whatever problem may have cropped up.
And not only that, by giving them the tools to be able to delegate as well, should something go wrong, it's a lot easier to hand off a picture to a venue coordinator or to a really eager banquet server who might just be a little early for their shift and wants to help out. It does take a bit of pressure off of them to have the tools to succeed as well.
Absolutely. Really good point. Lastly, in terms of being prepared, kind of goes along with your decor, but place cards or escort cards can take an immense amount of time to set up if they're not pre-organized. The other thing to think about is that sometimes partners who are meant to sit beside each other at tables don't have the same last names. And so you can't just throw a bunch of disorganized place cards at someone and say, put these out. So you'll need to have them organized. If it's an escort card display, organize them alphabetically. Alphabetizing 300 place cards takes a really long time. But if you do that with a glass of wine and an episode of Grey's Anatomy, or Bridgerton, actually, watch Bridgerton. If you do that 2 weeks before, then you're going to save an hour on the day for that person who's setting them out. If you're doing place cards, we always advise our couples to organize them by table clockwise, starting from 0, who is the person with their back to the head table. Then literally the person setting them up can go boom, 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 all the way around the table. And you're guaranteed that the partners are sitting beside the partners, even if it's not obvious that they're a couple. So being prepared and having all of that stuff set out before the day is really important, as is talking through the big pillars of the day. So hopefully the person who is managing things for you has some wedding experience, but they may not. They certainly haven't done hundreds of weddings like we have, and they may not have the ability to anticipate exactly what the ceremony is going to look like, or exactly when guests should be seated for dinner. So talk through all of those things. You'll want to talk through how the processional for the ceremony should go. You'll want to make sure that they understand how the photo timing is going to work. If there's a first look, especially. Usually photographers are really great at coordinating that, but if there's only one photographer, an extra pair of hands is often really handy there. So making sure that your manager, coordinator, whatever we're calling your friend who's in charge, making sure they know exactly how that first look is meant to flow is going to be really helpful when it comes to them helping the photographer keep things on time. Things like the grand entrance. If you're doing a grand entrance into your venue or into your tent, that's something that requires a shocking amount of communication between the DJ and the MC and the wedding party to make sure that it goes smoothly. So make sure that your manager knows how you're intending that to look. You also need to communicate that to your wedding party, because otherwise they're going to get in there and they're going to get to their table and they're not going to have any idea what to do. We always tell our couples and our wedding party that they all go in, they all stand behind their chairs, and then they stay standing until the couple is in, and then they all sit together. And it's not something that's going to ruin your wedding day if your wedding party is half seated, half standing, but it does look a lot cleaner and it'll flow a lot more smoothly if the person in charge of the processional or the grand entrance can tell the wedding party that. You'll want to talk through how speeches are going to look. Are they going to start speeches while dinner is still being served, or are they going to wait until that last plate has been cleared? If they're going to wait, how are they going to gather everybody back in? Because the longer you leave it, the more people you lose. They go out, have a smoke, they go to the bathroom. So making sure that you're clear with your coordinator about that, as well as the first dances. Do you want to take a break in between speeches and first dances? You can go back to some of the videos that we've talked about where I've used my favorite phrase, breaks are death.
Breaks are death.
Yeah.
Breaks are death.
Yeah. Anytime you give your guests a break, it's going to take you twice as long to recollect them as it would have to just push straight through. But anyway, you'll want to talk about how those things will flow with your coordinator before the day of the wedding.
You'll also want to make sure that you either describe what those people look like or pre-introduce whoever you've delegated as your coordinator that day to those family members. I know that even as a wedding coordinator, sometimes I get panicky if I've picked the right Uncle Todd because there's 4 Uncle Todds and I just asked the one groomsman that I trusted. But if I'm able to connect with them either at the rehearsal or beforehand, or if that wedding party member or that coordinator that you've delegated knows them, all the better.
For sure. You'll also want to think about some specific tasks that you are going to delegate to your coordinator. So it'll be things like exactly what decor they're setting up, giving the marriage license to the officiant if the officiant was not at the rehearsal, moving things. Oftentimes it'll be floral arrangements, for instance, from the ceremony to the reception and where they're going to get moved. Sometimes the coordinator will have to spearhead all of your cousins who are going to move your chairs from the ceremony into around the tables if you're doing a wedding on private property or at a barn, for instance, where you've only got one set of chairs. You're going to want to talk them through when they're to cue the guests. So if the cocktail hour is in a separate location from the reception, somebody needs to cue those guests as to when it's time to be seated for dinner. That's going to be your coordinator. They're going to need to communicate with the MC. So you'll want to make sure that you've introduced them to the MC and that they have an idea of what the MC is going to be doing. They'll need to coordinate the timing of the reception events. So oftentimes that means that you're keeping an eye on the food service, because a lot of times you're going to cue a speech based on the service of a course, or you're going to cue a dance based on the conclusion of dessert service. So you'll need to make sure that you talk through those specific timings. As Jacqueline mentioned before, we always like to clear the card box and pack up gifts sooner rather than later. So that might be a task that you put on their list, as well as cleanup at the end of the night. Are they going to be responsible for packing up your decor? If you're at a venue where you have to be out at the end of the night, you need somebody to do that. And as Jacqueline mentioned, that somebody ideally should be sober because it's, we often joke that our jobs are like herding cats, which they very much are. But once those cats get drunk, it's a whole other ball game.
They've got their catnip. They're content. They don't need us.
Exactly. So making sure that someone who has their faculties intact to handle the cleanup at the end of the night is really, really important.
Not only for the obvious reason of knowing and remembering where things are, but there's a lot of venues, and as they should, they will not allow you to bring a ladder out to tear down all of your decor if there is not somebody sober to do so. So if you've taken time to hang all of this beautiful greenery or any of this draping, and you're responsible to tear it down, or you have to pay an additional fee to come in the next day, chances are you're going to be paying that additional fee because they're not going to legally allow anybody that's drunk on a ladder.
Absolutely. So I think the final thing that I would recommend that you do is make sure that you have a secondary go-to person who is not you. And this is something that, I mean, when we do a day of coordination, are always trying to stay away from all of your guests and your wedding party, and especially you, so that you can relax and enjoy the day. But sometimes we do need to go to another person just to clarify, hey, this just happened. This is what we think we should do. Is this what the couple is really going to want? And that person should never be you. So sometimes it could be a maid of honor. Maybe it's one of the parents. And that's a last resort. We don't want to interrupt parents as they're celebrating their child's wedding. But the coordinator needs to know that there's one person who, if they can't solve a problem, can help them figure out a solution. So electing someone as the sort of second for the duel is going to be an important thing to do as well.
Yes.
So I think that, I mean, we could, like I said, talk until Wednesday about all of the things that come along with day of coordination. But I think those are the major things that you're going to want to keep in mind. Grab that document that we've put into the comments, and that'll help sort of get your juices flowing about the kinds of things that you're going to need to task someone with handling on the day. As Jacqueline mentioned, booking early if you're looking for professionals is definitely important. I had to turn away another couple of couples for 2022 today and yesterday, because we are unfortunately booked solid for 2022, as are a lot of other coordinators in the area. But if you have the means and the finances in your budget to hire a professional, I would always suggest that you do that. So if you're looking for a day of coordinator or a full service planner for 2023, give us a call. We would love to chat more about your wedding. And if it's not in your means, hopefully what we talked about today is helpful and will give you some ideas of things that you can cover with the person who is helping you out on your day.
Yeah.
All right. So thank you so much for joining us here. And we will be back next Sunday. Jacqueline, I always forget to look at what we're talking about next Sunday. What are we talking about next Sunday?
DIY florals, which is perfect segue for me to shamefully plug that our workshop this month at the studio is actually a super cool hands-on creative experience with Mary of Spring Hill Florals. So if anybody is tackling their own centerpieces, this is a really great workshop to maybe do some trial and error to see how much time you should be allocating to be doing those.
Mary is an incredibly talented designer, so I am really excited for this workshop. So if you're interested in reserving your space in the workshop, shoot us a message and we will get you hooked up.
All right, everybody. Have a great week, Amy. I'm sure I'll see you.
You as well. Absolutely. All right. Take care, everybody. And as always, hit us up with any questions or comments. If you want to plug a comment into the comment box, or send us an email, amy@unmistakably you.com or Jacqueline@unmistakably you.com. Have a great week. Take care.
See you guys.